So I received a notification from a petition site called change.org in connection with a woman by the name of Shanene Thorpe. I'm going to begin by showing you a clip from a television show called Newsnight.
Explain to me, just tell me a bit about your situation. You've got a daughter or a son?
Daughter, yeah, she's going to be 3 next month. We live together, just me and her. I got that accommodation not through the council, but I found it myself and then applied for housing benefits separately.
You're on housing benefit, you get help from the state for your housing. Don't you think that you should have possibly lived at home until the point at which you could support your own house?
Well, I find that living at home with my mum just wouldn't be an option really, space-wise. There's not enough space for...
How big's her flat or house?
She does have a 2-bedroom flat.
It doesn't sound to me like your house and your mother's house, your mother's flat, is a bad place. So it's a choice you're making, and it's a choice that comes with a price tag attached.
Yes, it's a choice, but at the same time, you know, I don't think living in my mum's house would have been... It wouldn't have been constructive.
But, I mean, we both know people that are living with their parents, they don't have a job, and they have fights, that's what happens, but they don't have a financial choice.
I think that's the difference, because I'm asking for help towards, I'm not asking for a free handout.
The Newsnight clip you just saw was part of a show covering a plague of people who scrounge off of the state. It's actually a pretty heavy piece of propaganda which in itself is unacceptable for a television show produced by the British Broadcasting Corporation, itself a publicly funded television broadcaster. First of all, I'll dispense with the facts. Shanene Thorpe is a mother of 1. She is living in Tower Hamlets, an expensive region of London. Her accommodation is one she sought privately. She works full-time for Tower Hamlets Council. This is important and was not mentioned at all in the clip you just saw. She also claims certain benefits from the state in order to make up the shortfall in her rather expensive costs of living in Tower Hamlets. She agreed to appear on Newsnight programme in good faith. The interview was conducted in a cafe that was directly underneath her place of work. So, when a TV programme funded by a TV broadcaster, that is in turn funded by public funds, does a Fox News, I get upset. There are laws against this sort of thing when it comes to news channels in the UK, and while they don't extend to programmes such as Newsnight, they damned well should. Back to Shanene. Remember I stated that she works full-time for Tower Hamlets Council in London. Well, the interviewer, one Allegra Stratton, sought to portray her as an unemployed mother who was scrounging from the state. Allegra Stratton focuses heavily on Shanene not living at home with her mother in her mother's 2-bedroom apartment. No mention was ever made in the programme as aired about her having full-time work, and thirdly, the interviewer rarely looked at Shanene. It reflects poorly on a television broadcaster when they hire someone who is prepared to go as far as propagandizing for a specific political agenda, in this case, being to argue against giving financial support to people who need it. If this had happened on a news programme, the news broadcaster in the UK would now be facing serious misconduct charges, and would have to go through a series of hearings that could result in their broadcasting licence being pulled. As it is, the Shadow Minister Toby Perkins has called on BBC Newsnight to explain itself over this issue. First of all, why was there never any mention of Shanene Thorpe having a full-time job with Tower Hamlets Council? That is a piece of personal information that would be rather critical in how her circumstances played out, as well as in how she would be perceived by members of the public. Considering the fact that she works full-time, she should not have been demonised in this fashion. Secondly, what right does Miss Stratton have to demand that Miss Thorpe live in her mother's apartment with her child? The definition of personal space is not simply confined to one of adequate living quarters, but also involves other circumstances such as how well parent and offspring get along, whether grandparent and grandchild can live in the same space considering the needs of a young child, and whether or not the parent of a young child really needs to be living in the space of a grandparent who has already raised a child or children and therefore has no real need of doing it all over again. There are many reasons why having multi-generational households like this are not advisable, and the psychological damage that can result is not to be taken lightly or dismissed, as it was here. In the final analysis, Shanene Thorpe's decision to live in her own place is her choice, her right, and her business. If the benefits agency had a problem with it, they would be perfectly well within their rights to question her decision to do so, and to award her whatever measure of benefit award they feel she is entitled to do so. The fact that they have approved her award to cover her costs of living in her location is something that is between the benefits agency and Miss Thorpe. It should be noted, however, that Tower Hamlets is an expensive place to live, but it should also be noted for people who tell her she should move to a cheaper region of the city, that in doing so she could well have to give up her job, which would result in a sharp decrease in her income, which could very well mean that more money would need to be paid by the state to allow her to live. Thirdly, Miss Stratton suggested at the end of the clip that people who don't have a job don't have a financial choice but to live with their families, and that fights do happen. Couple this with the lack of any mention whatsoever of Shanene's work for Tower Hamlets Council, and you are left with a strong implication that she doesn't work either, which is simply not true. This is propagandizing of the worst kind. A petition is already in circulation to get Newsnight to apologise for this disgraceful conduct of theirs in allowing an obviously biased Miss Stratton to conduct this smear campaign against a full-time employed working parent who is just trying to get by. Miss Stratton was aggressive in her questioning, which was completely unnecessary and obviously made Miss Thorpe feel uncomfortable. She doesn't have the right to do that, and the BBC doesn't have the right to portray her as a lazy leech on society. The problem is not that she is receiving handouts while being in full-time work. The problem is that the council she is working for are paying too little money for her to meet her needs in an expensive area like Tower Hamlets. Now I'm going to address one point I can see coming from the randroids who are likely to come to my channel. But if she doesn't like it, she can just move. Yeah, this is the same justification that is used to state to libertarians who don't like the social contract of the country that they are living in. All you have to do to cut off your obligation to the social contract is to renounce your citizenship and leave the country. Libertarians and randroids scream at the top of their lungs how unfair this is, and yet they would say it's perfectly fair to expect someone who is already employed to move to another part of town in order for them to get their way. Well, if it's good enough for her, it's good enough for you too. And if you want to go on about how unfair it would be for you to be made to leave your country, which is in effect a choice that you can make, then it is equally unfair to expect this woman to give up her job and move someplace else just because you don't like the idea of paying taxes towards someone like this, who is receiving additional assistance to supplement her full-time income in order to allow her and her daughter a comfortable standard of living. The psychological needs of a person are just as important as the physical needs, and having someone exist hand to mouth is insufficient to that need. Now I'm sure there will be other objections of the sort that we've seen again and again and again from these people, and they've already been addressed countless times by myself and others, so I will only discuss them as they come up. The petition is below. Feel free to offer support if you think it's worthwhile. Thank you for listening.